Newsmaker Sunday with Fox 10's John Hook.
Thanks for joining us on Newsmaker Sunday. Over this next half hour, you're going to meet the two candidates for Arizona Attorney General. And we'll begin this first segment with the Democratic nominee, which is Felecia Rotellini. Great to see you.
Great to be here. Thank you.
You ran, of course, last time in 2010, lost to Tom Horn.
Yes.
Let me run video of Tom Horn just to start the program off, because what was your impression on Tuesday night when he lost? Did you expect it? Did you think this was going to happen?
We knew there were a lot of attack ads that were going to impact the voters, and so we weren't surprised that he didn't win.
You wanted to run against him, I would suspect. You wanted a rematch, right?
It would have been awesome to have a rematch. And the polling showed I could beat him handily, which I think is exactly why there was a challenger that came in and funded by dark money to make sure he didn't win.
Tell me about what you see as the Attorney General is obviously the top legal representative for the state of Arizona.
Yes.
What is your job as you see it, and what do you want to bring to this job?
My job is to be the lawyer for the people of Arizona. It's not a political job, it's a public safety job. And I want to take politics out of that office and make sure that every day all of those assistant AGs are making decisions in the best interest of the people. As a lawyer, and as the lawyer for the people, I have an ethical duty of competence, of loyalty, to do what's in the best interest of the people. And that's what I did for those 13 years that I was in the office.
Now, you worked with Janet Napolitano in that office, Grant Woods in that office, Terry Goddard in that office.
Yes.
You've worked with Democrats and Republicans.
Yes.
Is it really nonpartisan?
It is a nonpartisan position. The Attorney General really needs to rise above partisan politics and be an independent watchdog for the people. And it was very interesting to watch the different administrations, to be part of those administrations. And I really believe, because of those three past leaders, that you can have an office that's nonpartisan. It's about doing the right thing for the right reasons. That's what Grant Woods said to me the day I was hired. Janet
Napolitano, when she was Attorney General, she contacted me. She said, I want to go around the state and do these forums, crime in the community. And she said, I want you to help me host it and do it. And I said, sure, if you're going to ask, I'm going to do it. I'll help you out. So we did it. And one of the things she focused on, as you know, was cybercrime.
Right.
She was way ahead of the curve on cybercrime. That was something that office really attacked. Is there a particular thing you'd want to attack?
I'm going to go after sexual predators online as well. Here are my priorities. Protect our kids, go after sexual predators, go after sex trafficking. There's a lot of work to be done there. Domestic violence at a statewide level. I'm going to have a domestic violence ombudsman that can work with our rural counties and make sure that we're being as effective as we can on domestic violence. We're going to go after the drug cartels. We're going to go after border crimes. We're going to go after organized crime. And we're also going to investigate, and I'm very much about investigating public corruption regardless of the political party.
Border was such a big part of this election cycle. That became a big issue when it really, in terms of a state issue, there's not a lot, as we saw with SB 1070, the law has pretty much been gutted. There's not a lot a state can actually do. Do you see it that way?
Here's what the Attorney General's office can do. As the top law enforcement officer, we can go after the drug cartels and the criminals that enter Arizona and travel up north to the distribution centers. The smugglers of drugs, of humans, they come through Arizona. We can follow the money. We can track the money. When I was the head of the Department of Financial Institutions, I oversaw the regulation of money transmitters. They often are in the middle of facilitating these illegal activity and the profits. That's a big job for the Attorney General's office. There's the ability to do forfeiture, to seize assets, really hit the organized criminals at the border.
That can be a windfall for law enforcement, too. All right. The print's a little small, so a couple things. How you got here, how you got to this point. You graduate from law school, Notre Dame, right?
Yep.
You become a trustee of the Boys and Girls Club of Metro Phoenix.
Right.
What did you do in that job?
We actually created the policies for investments. I actually had 2 terms as the head of that organization. It was really a forerunner to my work on the Baptist Foundation case, because the Boys and Girls Club Foundation was a nonprofit that solicited investors and contributions to make sure the Boys and Girls Clubs of Metropolitan Phoenix would keep going and have a legacy. My job when I was in the Attorney General's office, I went after Arthur Anderson for the failed audits of the Baptist Foundation, which was a nonprofit, who had a mission that was about charitable giving, but that wasn't what they were doing.
And that resulted in a very large settlement. I'm trying to think, it was $217 million back to investors who'd been cheated in what was described as a Ponzi scheme.
For once, the government and the regular.
Back on Newsmaker Sunday now, as we get to know the Attorney General candidates, we had Felecia Rotellini, the Democratic nominee, in the first half of the program. Mark Brnovich is our guest on Newsmaker Sunday for the second part, the Republican nominee for Attorney General. Good to see you.
Thank you, John. Thank you for having me here.
Good to have you on. Let me first roll tape one, which is Tom Horne. You beat him on Tuesday night. Did you know it was coming, and what did it come down to in your view?
Well, you know, we felt very confident going into election night. I know a lot of times politicians say that, but we did. I mean, the polls showed us doing well, and I could just feel it. We could see it. When I first started running this campaign, you know, the pundits gave us no chance. They, you know, you go pull up the articles back from January and February.
We didn't know how to say your name. I mean, I knew from the Goldwater Institute, but I'll tell you, people struggled with it.
Well, people don't.
It's like, buy a vowel, please.
Well, people used to ask me about that, John, and I used to always joke that you say it just the way it's spelled, Mark. M-A-R-K, so.
Touche.
But I will tell you what, Bill Montgomery, who had supported me in the primary, Bill's a great guy, used to sometimes introduce me at events and joke that, you know, because when I was gaming director, we came in under our budget appropriation. We were very fiscally responsible. And Bill used to joke that I'm such a fiscal conservative, I won't even buy vowels for my last name. So.
Okay, now I have to ask you, and this will come to mind, and you'll be asked this a million times. Was this a vote for Mark Brnovich or a vote against Tom Horne?
I think it was a both. I really do. When I started to say is when we were out there campaigning early on, sometimes, you know, you'd show up in Nogales and there'd be 10 people there and at a room in a lunch to hear you talk, and you'd sometimes think, you know, am I doing the right thing? And you know, the way I was brought up was just, you know, if you have the courage of your convictions and you do it the right thing in the right way, work hard, it'll eventually work out. And so we kept grinding and we kept making those connections. And I know the response that we had received when we were out on the campaign trail was overwhelming. You know, as you know, John, I've never run for office before. I'm not a politician. Most of my career has been spent working with law enforcement, keeping our community safe. And so I knew that we had to work hard, and I knew that when folks got to know me and they got to hear about me, the response was overwhelming. So we were very confident. But the reality is, you know, as I was out campaigning, I mean, when you're the Attorney General, you learn this. First day or two on the job as a prosecutor or police officer, you will be held to a higher standard, you know, because you have that ability to take away people's livelihoods.
It's the, and I talked to Ms. Rotellini about the same thing. It's the top, you're the top representative legally for the state of Arizona.
Correct.
Does it matter who the governor is and of what party?
I don't think it necessarily matters who the governor is per se, but the Attorney General, being the state's chief law enforcement officer, there's a lot of power, there's a lot of authority, there's a lot of responsibility. I mean, there's been, you know, newspaper reports just in the last few weeks about prosecutors in Texas that indicted a sitting governor, and a lot of people think that's very, very politically motivated. We see the Obama administration with its overreach and its infringement on Arizona's sovereignty having a detrimental impact on our economy. For example, with the new EPA coal carbon war on coal, new carbon regulations. And so there are a lot of things that the Attorney General can and can't do. And most importantly, the Attorney General is also there to defend our state statutes and enforce the law, the rule of law. And so if you have an Attorney General, regardless of party, who's unwilling to enforce the law, to pick and choose which laws will be enforced, how they'll be enforced, that's really detrimental, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat.
Now, what is it that brings you to this race, and what would you want to accomplish in this position?
Well, you know, growing up here, I'm very fortunate and blessed, John, you know, and I don't know if you know or the viewers know, and I talked about this on election night, that, you know, I'm a public school kid who grew up here in Phoenix, went to Arizona State. My mother was an immigrant to this country, lived through, you know, World War II, communism, and so when she came here, she instilled in us a real sense that this is such a great country, and we have an obligation to keep that torch of liberty and freedom burning. We have an obligation to help those that can't help themselves. And so I think that's why I was drawn to being a prosecutor, why I was drawn to serve our country in the Arizona Army National Guard, and why, frankly, I was drawn to run for Attorney General, because the stakes are so high right now. We cannot afford to have a liberal Democrat who's going to be beholden to Eric Holder and the Obama administration as our Attorney General. We need someone there that's going to be a fighter.
And you believe Felecia Rotellini would be that?
Oh, absolutely. 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 I just think the stakes are so high we can't afford that. And that's why I was willing to take on an incumbent in my own party, something that's really unprecedented. And, you know, mathematically, you have a very slight chance of winning, and especially when you get outspent by so much. But I just really felt that if we work hard, it was the right thing to do.
If you win, what would be the things that you would want to achieve in that office?
Well,
what are the things that you would say, this is what Mark Brnovich wants to do as Attorney General?
I want to be known the same thing I was known as, whether it was gaming director or whether I was a prosecutor at the federal level or the state level, is someone that wants to protect Arizonans. Someone wants to protect the most vulnerable, to be that voice for people that can't speak for themselves. You know, I used to be a gang prosecutor, and you know, sometimes you see these just terrible, horrible cases dealing with drive-by shootings, you know, aggravated assaults, or you know, I handled home invasion cases. I remember one time I had an elderly couple that there was two guys that were murder suspects, and they had done this home invasion on this elderly couple that were in their 80s. And I just remember we had to go through that trial, and the gentleman who is deceased now had a stroke, and he couldn't even talk. And I just thought to myself, the tragedy of having someone living their golden years, having to be terrorized and having to go through that process is just unfathomable, and we can't afford that. So I want to make sure that we're there to protect the most vulnerable. I've talked about since day one, the children, the elderly. I want to be there to make sure we bring federal, state, local law enforcement.
Tell me about your time in the Goldwater Institute. How does that define who you are and what you would bring to this job, or does it?
Well, you know, I think that it's part of who you are. I mean, everything you do in your life is a little part of you. And I mean, you know, I've been working steadily since I was a paperboy with the Arizona Republic and then the Phoenix Gazette.
Yeah, which no longer exists, of course. And I remember it, but a lot of our viewers may not.
This is the one thing about growing up here and the election, the night of the election, I was literally getting messages, emails from people. Hey, we were paperboys together in the 7th grade. Do you remember me? Wow. And it's a surreal experience for someone like me. But yeah, you know, from working as a paperboy, you know, I worked at the Goldwater's department store when I was in high school and early college, and then
Barry Goldwater was a big factor in your mom's when she came to this country.
Absolutely. You know, I will say that you know, Barry Goldwater is one of my political heroes. I think that he was whether you agreed with him or not, you always knew where he stood, and he loved the state so much. And if you look at everything from his books on photography to the things that he did, even working across the aisle to make sure that we had the Central Arizona Project, Barry Goldwater always put Arizona first. And so my time at the Goldwater Institute, you know, I wrote a lot about the importance of property rights, individual liberty, First Amendment issues, and you know, those are things that I think still resonate and are important with people.
On your campaign, and it's blocked out on my sheet, but on your campaign website, doesn't it say something about conservative on there? Does it say that?
Yeah, well, you know, we've talked about the fact that my campaign has been about Arizona or conservative values.
Conservative values.
I consider myself an Arizona conservative in the Barry Goldwater tradition.
And that's important in your view to bring to that job. And you declare it. I mean, Felecia Rotellini, she doesn't have anything like that on her site. She's trying to say, and just told us on this program, she's an independent agent and she really doesn't see the job as partisan. Do you?
Well, you know, I don't consider the job partisan in the sense that the law is what it is. But obviously, with what's going on in this country right now, with the stakes being so high, where you have a federal government, where you have an Obama administration that's willing to basically disregard our immigration laws, which is willing to basically undermine Arizona's economy with its war on coal. You know, we need an attorney general that understands those are big issues.
You're saying to fight back on behalf of the state.
And so I am willing. I would be willing to take on, you know, President Obama when he does things that affect us.
That sounds like Tom Horn. A lot of the stuff that Tom Horn did.
I will say that there are some things that Tom Horn did that I agree with. There's some things that he did that I didn't agree with. But at the end of the day, I am a prosecutor in my heart, and that's what I've done for much of my career, working with law enforcement. And so the important thing, John, is that, and I said this a lot on the campaign trail, issues facing us as a state in this country aren't about right and left, they're about right and wrong. And the rule of law is so important. And I've always said that, you know, people have asked me a myriad of questions, you know, and I always say, look, what I think the law is or should be really is irrelevant when you're a prosecutor. I never once asked a victim of a crime, are you Republican or Democrat? I never asked a witness, are you Republican? It's irrelevant. And as someone that's been a real line prosecutor, I understand that. I understand what it's like to prosecute cases and protect them and be a voice for those that have to.
If there's an attorney general passed in this state that you would probably be most like, who would it be?
You know, I think that's tough to say. I've always felt like I'm my own person, and I think this goes back to, you know, my background and the way I was brought up.
Who did you respect? Who did you think did a really nice job in that office?
Well, I think Bob Corbin was a very, very good
That
attorney.
goes back to the Evan Meekum days.
Well, and remember, he was willing to
Even
take
before.
He was willing to take on Evan Meekum. In fact,
That's right.
folks that grew up here and remember that stuff.
That's right,
remember
with the Martin Luther King holiday that he said Babbitt created illegally.
Well, Bob, yeah, no, that was Evan Meekum. Let's just be clear about that. But Bob Corbin and Evan Meekum disagreed on issues, and Bob Corbin was willing to stand up for the rule of law and what was right. And I think at the end of the day, that's what's important. And that's what I was getting at, John. When you're the Attorney General, you know, you got to dance with who brung you. You don't pick and choose winners and losers, and you don't get to pick and choose which laws you want to enforce or not.
So quickly, a vote for Mark Brnovich is a vote for what?
I think it's a vote for Arizona values. It's a vote for protecting the most vulnerable in our society, whether it's the children or whether it's the elderly. It's a vote for protecting Arizona against the overreach of the Obama administration.
We've got, Steph, about a minute left. Let me show you video of your opponent, and I want to get your take on Felecia Rotellini, and I had her give a take on you as well in the last segment. And she was very pretty even-handed about it. You guys did work together.
We did for a little bit, yes, that's true.
What do you think about her? What do you think about your opponent?
You know, I think Felecia is going to be a very formidable, a very tough candidate. We know that she's sitting on a pile of money. We know that she's been running for the last 5 years. You know, but at the end of the day, I'm very pleased with our campaign. I'd like to talk about my ideas, my values, and I will say I was a little disappointed because the night of the election and even the following day, Felecia already was on the attack and attacking us. And to me, that's a thing. I'm a little disappointed in that because I think that, you know, I'm willing to stand on my resume, my values, my ideas, my beliefs, you know, talking, you know, about those issues, and I'd rather not go into my opponent. I mean, I got enough to worry about. You know,
I get it.
You know,
if there's a clear dividing line, though, for people watching the program and they're unsure where you two stand, what would be the dividing line that you would say, I'm here, she's there, and there is no real middle ground here? What would it be?
You know, I think this goes back to convictions, convictions in the courtroom. And convictions in our professional life, and I think that folks know where I stand. They know what I believe.
You mean literal and figurative convictions?
I mean, like literal. I mean, I'm the only candidate. I mean, you know, I've actually tried cases in the criminal justice.
She has too.
Yes. So, well, you know, I guess as this campaign goes out, we can talk about that. But I mean, you know, I've done violent felons. I've faced off with gangbangers in the courtroom. I'm the only candidate that's actually tried cases in both the federal system and the state system. I've done jury trials, John, and so I know what it takes to be a prosecutor. I was the director of a law enforcement agency where I oversaw 35 police officers. I have the experience, and we need someone's going to hit the ground running.
I got to leave it there
because we're going to.
Thank you, Mark Brnovich. Good to see you. Good to spend some time with you. And when we come back on Newsmaker Sunday, we're going to hear briefly from the two candidates for governor, Republican and Democrat, when we come back on Newsmaker Sunday. A quick leave with the two candidates for governor, Ducey and Duval. Here they are.
We're focusing on kickstarting our economy and improving K-12 education. We don't see these as partisan issues. We think this affects everyone across the state, the opportunity to have a job, to climb the economic ladder.
We've got to stop cutting education, grow better jobs in Arizona. Our economy is not growing the way we want it to. We've got to get more startups. We've got to get more manufacturing. We've got to recruit more businesses to Arizona.